If we multiply them all together, we'll find out that the world will live for 3 huge sea monsters. Do you want to know how long that is?
I think I should.
It's 19,683 years, so we can sleep easy tonight.
Why do you think that Henry commissioned this exquisite pavement? What do you think it would have meant to him?
I think it was a way of him connecting with the divine. This, after all, is the pattern, the divine pattern of the universe. So by standing in this position for his coronation, he was drawing down upon himself the power of the universe, the divine power.
So when he was here, it was as though he was in the very centre of the universe, and around his periphery was the information that the universe itself would one day end.
The king is the centre of the social and political universe of his country, and indeed his reign will come to an end, and he was very keen that he would be remembered as being a holy king.
You could simply interpret it as a pavement which is about the end of time, about the end of the world. But because it must have been the pavement on which the coronation happened, you could also interpret it as a pavement which is about underpinning royal power, underpinning a rather grand cosmic view of royal power.
The Cosmati was modelled on Italian floors in Rome. Today, there's a massive conservation project to clean and restore over 80,000 tesserae, small pieces of exotic stone.
This is actually one of the first opportunities in modern times to actually study a Cosmati floor anywhere, which is a fantastic opportunity for us.
It's fantastic, isn't it? It's an exotic, plucked out of its own culture and placed right in the middle of Westminster Abbey. How do you think this floor would originally have been constructed?
We're only speculating, but we believe that the tesserae are likely to have been cut, possibly in Italy, to a template. So we're imagining that the bags of tesserae came with the Italian marblers and they just laid in the pattern.
So what's the quality of the work like?
It's just supreme. The quality of the workmanship is absolutely fantastic. It's faultless. The technique of cutting these very dense, hard stones, they've made it look simple and easy because they're so brilliant. And we're led to believe that this floor was laid in a year and executed to perfection. Parts of the floor, maybe 30%, is in such good condition that it's as good as it was when it was laid 750 years ago.
By underpinning royal power, the pavement was perfect for its creator, King Henry III. Like his role model, St. Edward, it was believed Henry's body could perform miracles by curing people. Not only that, but Henry saw himself as ruling over England with divine authority. And the Abbey came to encompass every aspect of his power.
This building, with its stunning architecture, is called the Chapter House. It was created by Henry III, and unlike everywhere else in the Abbey, this wasn't a place of worship. It was basically a meeting room. It was where Henry talked to his courtiers. And pretty soon the House of Commons itself was sitting here. So now the fate of the Abbey had become intertwined with the fate of government.
In a curious way, of course, two things shaped Westminster under Henry III. The first is he built the Abbey, but the second is, of course, that Parliament and the whole beginnings of Parliament at Westminster belonged to his time too. And in a way the two go together, Parliament and the Abbey. And those two things which have held Westminster and created modern Westminster, in a way created modern Britain.
Westminster had become the place which created order. Even today, the legal year opens with a service in the Abbey and a theatrical display from the people who radiate power. But while today we can appeal to higher courts and we can vote for who we want in power, in the 13th century, things were rather different. To the medieval mind, there was a natural order in the universe, with God in heaven at the top, then on earth the king appointed by God, under him the people in charge, and at the bottom, people like me. What this meant was that you couldn't disagree with the king, because he wasn't answerable to his people, only to God.
The more time I spend here, the more I realise that this place is all about who's in charge. Because if you're the monarch, an awful lot of your legitimacy is based on your relationship with the Abbey. It tells people very clearly that you have the absolute right to be king or queen, not because your dad was king, or you're the nearest long-lost relative, or because you're a good governor, but because God has chosen you.
When Henry VIII came to the throne, like kings before him, he believed he was appointed by God to rule on earth. He saw himself as so powerful, he could even dismiss the Catholic Church. Henry became head of the Church of England. Abbeys were dissolved throughout the country. Even the Westminster monks fled. Over the next few decades, Catholic and Protestant monarchs fought for control of the country. But whatever religion the king or queen believed in, they were all crowned at Westminster Abbey.
I think the Westminster Abbey, in a way, is simply it's too important a building, it's in too important a place to simply get rid of. You're not really going to do that because it's very much the advantage of the monarchy, even as they're making changes, to keep up a royal link with the Abbey. In a sense, the more you're making change, the more important it becomes to emphasize royal authority. And obviously one of the key aspects of the Reformation is about royal authority over the church.
It was up to Elizabeth I to resolve the direction of state religion. Today, an original portrait of Elizabeth that belongs to the Abbey is being conserved by specialists. By taking an X-ray of the portrait, they've also discovered it's not all as it seems. Elizabeth's 16th century face was painted over at a later date, possibly in the romantic 18th century.
That is a remarkable painting. This is all about splendour. This is as richly dressed as you could be. The quality is absolutely extraordinary, isn't it? When you look at all the different pearls, each one has been treated slightly differently. The reflections are slightly different. And it's just done so beautifully.
Yeah, it's as good as you get it at this time.
So what did she look like underneath?
Well, we took an X-ray, and this is what came up.
Wow.
So very different.
Yes, very different. This is a picture of a kind of soft, gentle girl almost, whereas the original face is a face of a queen. It's somebody who has authority, who has power, who's used to ruling. And that's actually quite a scary face.
Yeah, absolutely. This is a very striking image. This is a woman on top of the world.
Elizabeth used her power to take Westminster Abbey under the personal control of the monarch. Today, the Abbey is still answerable directly, not to an archbishop, but to the Queen. This has always been the royal church. And the one time England didn't have a monarchy, the Abbey still survived. It may seem surprising, but while civil war raged, Cromwell issued precise instructions not to destroy representations of kings.
Even Cromwell fell under the Abbey's spell. Not only did he save it from ruin, but he even adopted some of its traditions. For instance, he had his own form of royal coronation. He even became known as the king in all but name.
Unless you've knocked Westminster Abbey down, you need to exploit that place. Otherwise, contemporaries are going to say, well, it's not really a new order. They didn't use Westminster Abbey. You know, if Cromwell was really ambitious, he would have populated Westminster Abbey with a massive new ritual. So I think we've got to recognise, a little bit like modern politics, you don't suddenly have a massive break with the past.
Kings, queens and government have always protected Westminster Abbey, using it to affirm their power. Even the Abbey's tombs tell a story of royal authority. And today, conservators are revealing artworks only fit for a king. In 1997, Westminster Abbey was surrounded by wailing and flowers in a scene fit for a medieval saint. She may not have been the most popular princess in the royal household, but people would have been affronted if Princess Diana hadn't been brought here, into the national shrine. The Abbey's role as a place of memorial has deep roots. Ever since the 11th century, the Abbey has embraced the dead and everything they've stood for. And nowhere is this more true than the royal tombs. Today, conservators are revealing hidden clues to royal power.
Can I join you two?
Yes, come and join us, Tony.
Warwick, what is this extraordinary wooden thing?
Well, this is a canopy over the top of the tomb of Richard II and his queen, Anne of Bohemia. And it's one of several that we've got here in the east end of the Abbey. They are canopies of honour, basically.
Abby, I think you've been lying down here staring upwards at it for the best part of 3 weeks, haven't you? What is this honeycombed golden, rather manky stuff?
This is tin relief, which is a gilding decoration that was used for medieval decorative effect. They place it on in patches, which you can see the outlines of, and then it's gilded on top of that. Different layers are flaked off, sometimes just the gold, sometimes the tin, and sometimes the whole thing.
Yeah. Oh, there's a whole painting here, isn't there?
Yeah.
I hadn't realised that. I thought it was just great big clumps of rather unpleasant, gooey-looking gold, but it's a very elaborate painting.
This is the Almighty enthroned, making the sign of the blessing with his right hand and holding an orb in his left.
Warwick, it's so detailed, such a lot of work, but nobody could see it.
Well, that unfortunately is often the case with great medieval works of art and tomb canopies like this. Everything had to be done perfectly and beautifully decorated, even if you couldn't see it, even if it was only the Almighty who could see it. But in the case of this, of course, you've got lying underneath the King and Queen in their effigy form looking up at it. So, in a sense, there was someone looking at it.
They may be dead as doornails, but they can admire the art.
Exactly.
Royal tombs weren't just about honouring God after death. They were political broadcasts from the monarchy.
This tomb does take up a colossal amount of space.
It does. It's the monument to Henry VII, and you can see him lying there with his Queen, Elizabeth, to his left, erected in his own chapel and paid for finally by his son, Henry VIII.
This is odd, isn't it? You've got this dark stuff here, and then on top of it, what appears to be gold paint.
Well, what you can see there is the original metal of the cast bronze sculpture, and over the top, the artist has laid this very, very thin layer of gold leaf, so that the impression given is of a golden statue.
Who did it?
A man called Torrigiano, who came from Florence, extremely expensive job. He was one of the very few people who could handle the work.
It is rather odd, isn't it, that you've got the real body down here in the tomb and then you've got the pretend body on top?
Well, we don't know where the real body is, buried under the ground somewhere. But what we can see is the body they wanted us to remember, as it were, the monumental body which would give the impression of the king into eternity. That famous phrase, "The king is dead, Long Live the King, is all about that very important early idea that there is a separation between the natural